I couldn't believe it, my own sister. The one I trusted the most took him from me, my fiancé, my future, the man I thought was mine forever. I saw them together, laughing, holding hands like nothing was wrong. My heart shattered into pieces right there in front of my eyes. I didn't know then that betrayal could hurt this deeply, and that the person I loved most could be the one who hurt me the worst. Life felt perfect then. I thought everything was falling into place. My fiancé, James, he was kind, successful, carrying my dream partner. We spent evenings walking by the lake, holding hands, laughing, talking about the future. The way he looked at me, I felt seen, loved, complete. Our families were thrilled, celebrating our engagement, showers of congratulations, and smiles everywhere. I remember one afternoon sitting with my sister, Emily, in our cozy living room. She smiled at me, hugged me, saying, "You two are perfect together. I'm so happy for you." I believed her, truly. James surprised me with gifts, little notes, small gestures, nothing extravagant, but meaningful. I never imagined anyone could interfere, especially not my own sister. We planned our wedding together, choosing flowers, venues, music, laughing about silly details. Life was beautiful, effortless, until the first subtle crack. Emily began offering suggestions, too many, insisting, sometimes in a tone that hinted I should listen more. At first, I laughed, brushed it off, thinking sisters do that, they care, they give advice. But slowly, her smiles started feeling different, more calculated. One evening, she lingered near James, laughing at his jokes, leaning in, too close, too long. I noticed, but I told myself it's nothing, she's my sister, he loves me, right? I ignored the small pangs of jealousy, tiny hints of envy, brushing them off as my imagination. Dinner parties, family events, she was always near him, too attentive, asking questions, complimenting, laughing. I remember thinking, why does she act this way around him? But every time I mentioned it, she would smile, comforting, sisterly. "I just want the best for you, you know that," she said with that same sweet voice. And I believed her still because she was family, someone I trusted. James remained attentive, loving, but I started noticing small distractions, his phone lighting up, secretive smiles, moments he didn't explain. I didn't want to see it, didn't want to imagine betrayal. We went on trips together, romantic evenings, quiet dinners, sharing dreams. Emily sometimes joined unexpectedly, claiming it was casual, harmless family time. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling growing inside me. But one night, I caught a fleeting look, James and Emily laughing quietly, sharing a glance, too intimate. I wanted to confront, but something held me back. Fear? Denial? I brushed it off, telling myself, I'm overthinking, their family, nothing is wrong. Life continued, ordinary and happy, but the seeds of tension were planted. Every small smile, every subtle touch, every lingering conversation added weight, a quiet unease. I started noticing details, little habits, small gestures I had ignored before. And yet, I tried to maintain normalcy, smiling, laughing, pretending everything was perfect. Because I wanted to believe. I needed to believe life was still beautiful. But deep inside, I felt the first stirrings, the sense that something important was about to break. I didn't know how. I didn't know when, but I could feel it, a shadow creeping into the happiness I had taken for granted. Life felt like a dream. Every morning, I woke up smiling, thinking about James, our plans, our future. We spent weekends exploring the city, trying new cafes, attending art exhibits, laughing at each other's jokes. He held my hand everywhere, even in crowded places, a gentle reminder we were a team, together. I remember a rainy afternoon, walking with him under one umbrella, laughing as we splashed through puddles. Everything seemed perfect, almost unreal. Emily joined us occasionally, claiming she just wanted to spend time together, be part of our happiness. At first, I welcomed her, thinking she's my sister, she deserves to share these moments too. But sometimes, I caught her glances, lingering just a bit too long at James, the corners of her mouth curling into small smiles I didn't understand. One evening, James cooked dinner for me. Candlelight, soft music, everything intimate and romantic. Emily appeared at the door, saying she wanted to surprise me with a small gift. I smiled, thinking it was thoughtful, family-oriented, harmless. But I couldn't ignore the way she lingered near James, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm lightly, too casually. I told myself, I'm imagining things, she's my sister, nothing will happen. James noticed my hesitation, smiled reassuringly, kissed my forehead. Don't worry, nothing to worry about, he whispered, soft, gentle. I nodded, but a small seed of doubt had taken root. At the family brunch the next week, Emily sat next to James, leaning and listening intently, laughing at things that weren't that funny. I watched silently, smiling, pretending, but my heart sank a little. I began noticing small changes. James was a little distracted, sometimes answering texts quickly, covering his phone. I tried to ignore it, telling myself he's busy, it's normal, everything is fine. Emily continued her subtle involvement, offering suggestions, helping plan events, always being helpful. But I began feeling uneasy, a quiet tension I couldn't shake. One evening, James and I were planning our engagement party. Emily insisted on helping, sitting close to him, handing him decorations, her touch lingering. I felt a pang, jealousy, confusion, betrayal. I couldn't name it. I smiled, forced politeness, trying to ignore the discomfort. Later that night, James and I talked quietly. Do you feel like Emily's overinvolved sometimes? I asked cautiously. He laughed lightly, reassuring. She's just excited. You know how sisters are, nothing more than that. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But deep inside, I couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt. Emily's laughter, the way she looked at him, her small touches, it all began to feel different. I noticed her lingering in photos, leaning close in group pictures, smiling just a little too knowingly. Even friends began making small comments, noticing how close she and James seemed. I brushed them off, pretending I didn't hear, pretending I wasn't noticing. But alone, I felt my heart tighten, a quiet unease settling in. One night, I found a note she left, casually mentioning James, something small, but oddly intimate. I crumpled it, telling myself, don't overthink, it's nothing. And yet, the tension in my chest didn't disappear. I began watching interactions more carefully, every glance, every smile, every word. And every time I saw them together, laughing quietly, I felt a sharp pang of fear, betrayal, anticipation of heartbreak. I told myself, don't jump to conclusions, don't let paranoia take over. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something important was shifting. And though life seemed perfect on the outside, on the inside, a quiet storm was forming. I didn't know when it would hit. I didn't know how, but I could sense a fracture in the happiness I had taken for granted. The next weekend, Emily invited herself to a dinner date with James and me. She said it was just for fun, but her presence felt calculated, deliberate. As we ate, she laughed at his jokes, leaned in slightly, shared stories only he would find amusing. I smiled politely, staying composed, but my heart raced. I realized the storm wasn't coming, it was already here, quietly, subtly. And I knew that very soon, everything I loved, everything I trusted could be shattered. Life continued, but the unease grew. Every time Emily appeared, every time she smiled at James, I felt a quiet pang, jealousy, suspicion. I wasn't sure. I tried to focus on the happy moments, our dates, late-night talks, future plans. But even James seemed distracted at times, answering messages quickly, checking his phone, smiling at things he wouldn't share. Emily offered to help with our wedding preparations, choosing flowers, arranging seating, decorating. I wanted to believe she was just excited, helpful, caring. But I noticed the way she lingered near him, small touches, brushing shoulders, laughing a little too intimately. I told myself, sisters sometimes behave like this, nothing more. One afternoon, we went shopping for wedding outfits. Emily tagged along, smiling brightly, offering advice, touching James' arm lightly. I tried to ignore it, but every glance she gave him, every laugh, made my stomach twist. At dinner that night, I caught her whispering something to him. He laughed quietly, looked at me briefly, then back to her. I felt a knot in my chest, a warning I couldn't ignore. Is everything okay? I asked him later softly, trying not to show my fear. Everything's fine, she's just being silly, he replied, smiling, reassuring. I wanted to believe him desperately. But the feeling of unease didn't fade, it grew, quietly, persistently. Emily's presence became almost constant, at events, on trips, even in private moments. I began noticing the subtle ways she inserted herself, always near him, always attentive, always laughing at things I found ordinary. My friends started whispering, "Are you sure your sister doesn't like him?" I laughed it off, but inside the doubt gnawed. Late at night, I sat alone, thinking, reflecting, heart heavy, mind racing. Was I imagining things? Or was something really happening behind my back? I remembered our childhood. Emily always wanted what I had, toys, attention, even parents' praise. Could this be the same? A repetition, a hidden envy taking a dangerous form. I told myself, don't panic, don't confront, wait, watch. James remained loving, attentive, but small changes continued, moments of distraction, secretive smiles. I caught Emily looking at him, at me, at him again with a subtle smile, something unreadable. A family party, she insisted on helping him set up, he allowed it. I stood quietly, smiling, pretending, hiding my growing anxiety. I remembered the little things, how she seemed to know what he liked, his favorite coffee, how he liked his tie, small gestures. Was she paying attention or planning something? I couldn't tell, my heart raced, the tension thickened. James called me later. Don't worry, she's just excited, don't let it bother you. I nodded, pretending to be reassured, but deep down a warning bell rang. The next day, Emily sent a text joking, teasing about him. I felt my stomach twist, my hands tremble, a quiet fear building. I began noticing how easily they laughed together, shared looks, subtle touches. Every small smile, every whisper felt like a crack forming in my world. I tried to stay calm, pretend everything was normal, but I could not anymore. One evening, James mentioned a fun outing. Emily wanted to join. I forced a smile, said yes, heart heavy, knowing something was changing, shifting. That night, watching them together, laughing, sharing private jokes, leaning close, I realized the cracks were no longer small, they were growing, widening. And I felt it, a heavy, sinking feeling. The betrayal I had feared, the shadow I had sensed was approaching. I didn't know when it would strike. I didn't know how, but I could feel it. Something precious, everything I had built, was about to break. And I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The days passed, ordinary on the surface, but inside, tension simmered. I smiled, laughed, pretended, while my heart whispered warnings. James remained loving, attentive, caring, but I noticed the small things, the hesitation, the quick glances at Emily, the smiles that didn't reach his eyes. Emily continued to insert herself subtly, always nearby, always watching, always laughing at jokes I didn't hear. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But each night alone, I replayed moments, analyzed every glance, every word, every touch. One evening we had a quiet dinner. Emily joined, unexpectedly, claiming she wanted to help. James smiled, welcomed her. I forced a polite smile, my heart heavy, unease growing. She leaned in slightly, touched his arm lightly, whispered something, and he laughed quietly. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling of betrayal, anticipation of heartbreak, crept over me. That night, I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, replaying every interaction. I remembered childhood memories, moments when Emily tried to take what was mine, attention, love, praise. Could this be history repeating itself on a larger scale with my fiancé, my future? The next day, Emily offered to accompany us on a small shopping trip. James agreed. I reluctantly accepted. As we walked, I noticed her gestures, small touches, casual leaning, laughter, subtle hints of flirtation. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to smile, keep calm, pretend nothing was wrong. I told myself she is my sister, she wouldn't, could she? The day continued, mundane, ordinary, but the tension grew, invisible, heavy. Later, we returned home. Emily lingered, offering help, staying close, watching James, smiling. I noticed it, the way he responded subtly, quietly, looking at her in ways I hadn't noticed before. I tried to push the thought away, denial, hope, disbelief. But the feeling of unease, betrayal lurking, shadowing our lives, would not leave. That evening, James excused himself, leaving Emily and me alone. She smiled at me, sweet, sisterly, but her eyes, something unreadable, something calculating. I just want to help, you know that, right? She said, voice soft, but a hint of something beneath. I nodded, forcing trust, pretending to believe. But inside, my heart tightened, a quiet fear, anticipation of heartbreak, growing. Dinner came, conversations flowed, but I watched, noticed, analyzed every word, every gesture. And I felt it, the last thread of certainty, the calm before the storm. I wanted to confront, to ask, to demand honesty. But something told me, wait, watch, the truth will reveal itself. Even James seemed oblivious, unaware of the tension I was feeling, or perhaps blind. Emily's presence, subtle, constant, watching, calculating, the energy between them, impossible to ignore. I sat there, smiling, pretending, my heart racing, my mind spinning. The ordinary life we had, the happy engagement, the trust, all of it felt fragile, easily shattered. I realized the betrayal, the heartbreak, was closer than I wanted to believe. The cracks were no longer subtle, they were visible, growing, stretching across the life I thought was perfect. I felt a quiet panic, a sense of inevitability. The moment of calm, of normalcy, was ending. And soon, everything I loved, everything I trusted, everything I had built, would break. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but deep inside, I felt it, the storm approaching, ready to sweep away my dreams, my love, my future. And I knew the life I had known would never be the same again. The seeds of betrayal, sown quietly, had grown, matured, ready to explode. And I could only watch, helpless, aware, heart racing. Because very soon the perfect life, the happy engagement, the love I believed in, would shatter right before my eyes. I never expected it, the day I saw them together. Emily, my sister, the one I trusted, laughing with James, holding his hand, whispering things I was never supposed to hear. My heart stopped, frozen, pain hitting me like a storm. I blinked, unsure if my eyes were deceiving me. But no, the scene before me, undeniable, real. I felt my stomach twist, my hands tremble, my mind racing. How why? I whispered to myself, barely audible. They didn't notice me, caught in their own world, smiling, intimate, familiar, yet utterly wrong. I backed away silently, trying to understand, trying to process disbelief, denial. My thoughts raced, every memory, every moment they shared, replayed in my mind. Every laugh, every touch, every small gesture, suddenly tainted, poisoned. I wanted to scream, to confront, to demand answers. But my body felt paralyzed, my heart shattered. I remembered our happy times, his smiles, our plans, my dreams. And now, everything felt like a lie, a cruel joke, a nightmare. I went home, silent, heavy, pretending everything was normal. But inside, chaos raged, pain, disbelief, betrayal. I tried calling James, no answer. My heart sank, panic rising. Finally, he replied, casually, I'm busy, I'll call later. I stared at the screen, disbelief, my mind spinning. How could he? How could they? I thought about confronting Emily, my sister, my family, but fear, hesitation, and shock held me back. I spent the night awake, tears streaming, heart pounding, every scenario running through my head. How long had it been going on? Months? Weeks? Days? Had I been blind, naive, foolish? The next morning, I saw messages, subtle, flirty, from Emily to James on his phone. Proof, undeniable, my worst nightmare confirmed. I felt my hands shake, my chest tighten. Betrayal, the one thing I had never imagined, had invaded my life. I confronted James, trembling, voice breaking. How could you? How could you do this to me? He looked at me, guilt in his eyes, but hesitation, defensiveness. It's complicated, he stammered. Complicated? You call betrayal complicated? You call destroying my trust complicated? I shouted, tears falling, rage, and heartbreak mixing. He tried to explain, but words felt hollow, excuses meaningless. I felt the world collapse around me, the life I imagined gone shattered. Then I thought about Emily, my sister, my family, the one I had trusted most. I felt anger, hotter than grief, sharper than pain. How could she betray me like this for him, for money, for love, for attention? I realized I couldn't let this go, not without action. The seed of revenge, small at first, quietly planted. I began thinking carefully, calculating, plotting. How could I expose them, make them feel the weight of their betrayal without destroying myself in the process? The danger, social, personal, looming. What if someone finds out it was me? What if I'm blamed? But the desire, the hunger for justice, for recognition, for reclaiming my life, it burned stronger, hotter, undeniable. I started gathering evidence, photos, messages, small details I had ignored, things that would reveal the truth. Every text, every subtle interaction became fuel for my plan. I watched them carefully, learned their patterns, their habits, how they thought they could hide the truth. And then, I made the first move, small, deliberate, enough to test the waters. A subtle hint to James, something that showed I knew, but didn't expose everything. I watched his reaction, shock, fear, guilt. The ripple began, small tremors, shaking their perfect little world. I felt a strange satisfaction mixed with guilt, but stronger than anything else. The betrayal had been done, the pain inflicted. Now it was my turn, carefully, strategically, to take control. And as the first threads of my revenge unraveled, I realized nothing would ever be the same again. The calm, the ordinary life, was gone or replaced by tension, planning, anticipation, and a storm of emotions. Every move now, every word, every glance carried weight, consequences, risk. I had stepped onto a path, dangerous, thrilling, unavoidable. And I would not turn back. The next days, I moved carefully, quietly, deliberately. Every interaction, every smile, every word, I observed, calculated. I couldn't show my pain, not yet, not until the plan was ready. I watched Emily, noticed her routines, how she approached James, the subtle ways she tried to charm him. I began leaving small clues, hints, things she couldn't ignore, small whispers of suspicion, enough to disturb her comfort. I saw her hesitate, glance nervously at me, at James, something shifting, subtle cracks appearing. It gave me a strange satisfaction, the first taste of control. But danger loomed: social, personal. What if someone discovered my involvement, my plan? What if James, angry, betrayed, exposed me, or Emily, turned the tables? I couldn't afford mistakes. The stakes were high. Everything I loved, everything I trusted, everything I wanted was at risk. I started documenting photos, messages, small signs, building my arsenal silently, carefully. Every interaction, every small detail became important, part of the bigger plan. One afternoon, I left a subtle note, something that would make James question Emily, small enough to avoid suspicion. I watched from a distance, holding my breath, waiting, anticipating. He read it, paused, looked uneasy, glanced at Emily, a small frown, subtle fear. I felt a rush, a mixture of triumph and apprehension. The first ripple had formed, the consequences beginning, spreading slowly. Emily noticed the change, subtle, nervous gestures, small hesitations. I smiled quietly, hidden pleas, the balance of power shifting. But I knew it wasn't enough. The real confrontation, the real exposure, had to come later. I continued observing, noting weaknesses, subtle patterns, opportunities. Every word James spoke, every look, every touch between them, I catalogued, mentally preparing for the decisive moment. The tension grew, invisible, thickening, a storm ready to break. I couldn't reveal my feelings yet, couldn't expose them prematurely. One evening, at a family gathering, I noticed Emily lingering near James, brushing her hand casually, laughing softly. I stepped closer, pretending to engage, dropping subtle hints, questions, glances, enough to unsettle. She noticed, startled. The first signs of worry flickered across her face. James seemed confused, unsure, glancing between us, sensing something, but not realizing the full truth. I felt the thrill, dangerous, exhilarating, but controlled, careful. Later that night, I reviewed the evidence, compiled photos, texts, small notes, every tiny betrayal, proof, undeniable. I began to write silently in my journal, planning each step, anticipating reactions, consequences, outcomes. The plan was risky, dangerous, thrilling. Every move could backfire. Every decision carried weight. I thought about friends, family, what they would think, who might discover, who might take sides. But the desire for justice, for recognition, for reclaiming my life, outweighed fear, hesitation, doubt. I sent a subtle anonymous message to James, hinting I knew, nothing direct, just enough to make him question Emily. The reaction was immediate: unease, confusion, guilt flickering across his eyes. I smiled quietly, hidden in shadows, the ripples spreading further. Emily noticed, her calm veneer cracking, subtle anxiety, fleeting hesitation. The first signs of their fragile alliance beginning to crumble. I realized the power had shifted, tension was my ally now. But I couldn't act too fast, patience, timing, strategy. Every small move now carried weight, consequences, risk. I felt alive, alert, focused, every emotion heightened: anger, pain, determination, thrill. The betrayal had hurt deeply, but the revenge, carefully planned, slowly executed, brought clarity, purpose. I knew this was just the beginning, the first ripple, the tremor before the full storm. And as I watched, waited, planned, I felt the fire inside me grow, unrelenting, unstoppable. The first move had been made, and there was no turning back. The days that followed were tense, charged, every moment thick with anticipation. I watched them, Emily and James, from a distance, carefully, silently. Every glance, every laugh, every small gesture, I noted, cataloged, memorized. I knew I had to act carefully. One wrong move, and everything could collapse. I couldn't let anyone suspect. Not friends, not family, not James, not Emily. I began leaving small traces, hints of knowledge, subtle evidence, nothing too obvious. James noticed. Small signs of unease flickered across his face. He tried to act normal, but tension betrayed him. Emily's smiles grew forced, her laughter too loud, her gestures calculated. The power was shifting slowly, imperceptibly. I began writing, detailing every interaction, every betrayal, every moment I had witnessed. The journal became my weapon, my blueprint, my strategy. I tested small confrontations, subtle, indirect, questions, comments, enough to unsettle. Each reaction, every hesitation, I noted, planning the next step, building momentum. One evening, I arranged a casual dinner with friends where James and Emily would both be present. I dropped hints, casual remarks, subtle mentions, enough to make them feel observed, watched, exposed. I noticed Emily tensing, her eyes flicking toward me, lips pressed tightly, small signs of fear. James looked confused, nervous, glancing between us, sensing tension, but not fully aware of the truth. I felt satisfaction, but also caution, careful, controlled, timing was everything. Later, I intercepted messages between them, subtle evidence of her intentions, playful, intimate, too revealing. I documented everything, saving it carefully, proof, undeniable for the moment when exposure would be necessary. The thrill, dangerous, intoxicating, but so were the risks. I thought about what would happen if someone discovered my involvement. What if friends thought I was overreacting, or worse, manipulating events? What if James, enraged, turned the tables, exposed me? The danger made my heart race, adrenaline pulsing, but it sharpened my focus. I began planning the next move, bolder, more direct, closer to exposure. Subtle confrontations, planted doubts, carefully orchestrated situations, each designed to test, to destabilize. I arranged for friends to unknowingly witness interactions, hints of Emily's attention toward James, small moments of intimacy. Their reactions, slight glances, whispered comments, amplified the tension. Emily noticed, her composure slipping, subtle panic flickering across her face. James remained oblivious, still trying to maintain calm, but unease visible. I felt a mixture of satisfaction, anticipation, and fear all at once. Every move I made now carried consequences, weight, responsibility. I could no longer act lightly. The next steps would determine the outcome. I began to see cracks in their relationship, subtle, but growing, hesitation, doubt, fear. Each ripple, each small tremor, strengthened my resolve. The first bold step would come soon, the decisive moment, the exposure, the confrontation. But I had to wait, timing, strategy, patience. I rehearsed conversations, imagined confrontations, anticipated reactions, calculated outcomes. Every decision, every move had to be precise, flawless. The tension, excitement, danger, all intertwined, making my heart race, my mind sharper, focused, alert. I realized this was no longer just about betrayal, it was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my love, my future. I knew the stakes, high, perilous, thrilling. And yet, I was ready, determined, unstoppable. The stage was set, the pieces in place. And soon, the final moves, the climax, the exposure, the ultimate confrontation would come. Everything I had endured, the pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal, would reach its breaking point. And nothing would ever be the same again. The day had come, the moment I had been planning, anticipating. I watched them, Emily and James, unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. Everything had to be precise, every word, every gesture, every move. I approached James first, casually, innocently, dropping a subtle hint, nothing direct, just enough. He froze, a flicker of fear in his eyes, guilt, hesitation. I smiled politely, hiding the storm inside, keeping calm. Then, Emily, unaware, lingered near, attempting her usual charm, subtle touches, whispers. I felt anger flare, control, focus, determination, all mingling. I dropped another subtle clue, a message, a comment, something that would plant doubt in their minds. Emily's composure cracked, a flash of panic, subtle, fleeting, but noticeable. James looked confused, nervous, sensing tension, but not yet understanding. The first ripple of my revenge had begun, subtle, indirect, but effective. I watched, heart racing, every reaction, every hesitation, every small tremor. Then the first public sign, a friend noticed something, whispered, glanced. Emily noticed, fear flickering. I felt satisfaction, but I couldn't celebrate yet. Patience, timing, strategy. I continued carefully, orchestrating situations, subtle confrontations, hints of exposure, all leading to the inevitable. Every small move, a test, a step closer. Emily's smiles became strained, laughter forced, gestures calculated. James's unease grew, guilt, confusion, worry subtle, but growing. I documented everything, proof, undeniable, meticulously, silently. Every interaction, every glance, every touch became evidence, ammunition, a leverage. The tension in the room, invisible, palpable, thickening. Friends noticed, subtle hints, whispered comments, glances exchanged, tension mounting. I could feel the power shifting slowly, imperceptibly. I planned one decisive move, something that would tip the balance, expose them fully. It had to be perfect, flawless, undeniable. I rehearsed it mentally, imagined reactions, calculated outcomes, prepared for every contingency. Finally, the moment arrived, a carefully orchestrated situation, a public interaction, just enough to trigger suspicion, attention, confrontation. Emily faltered, small signs of panic, trying to regain control, her facade slipping. James hesitated, confusion and guilt evident, trying to maintain calm, but failing. I watched quietly, a mixture of satisfaction, thrill, apprehension, danger. The ripple spread, subtle, yet powerful, consequences beginning to unfold. Friends and family noticed, whispers, glances, curiosity, tension. Emily's panic grew, gestures frantic, words clipped, smiles strained. James looked torn, uneasy, caught between loyalty, love, fear. I realized the first act of revenge had succeeded, the first fracture in their alliance undeniable. But I couldn't act too quickly, patience, timing, precision. Every move now carried consequences, risk, danger. I had set the stage, the pieces were in motion. The first ripple of chaos had begun, spreading silently, unstoppable. I felt a mixture of triumph, relief, anticipation, and fear. The storm I had prepared, carefully, silently, was now alive, moving, shifting, changing everything. And I knew nothing would ever be the same. The betrayal had been punished subtly, indirectly, but effectively. The first consequences, small tremors, were only the beginning. Soon the exposure, the confrontation, the ultimate reckoning would arrive. And I would be ready, patient, focused, unstoppable. The calm, the ordinary life, the facade of perfection all shattered. The revenge had begun. And there was no turning back. The day had arrived, the moment I had been waiting for. Everything was in place, every piece of evidence, every subtle hint, every calculated step. I could feel my heart pounding, adrenaline surging, anticipation gripping me. James and Emily were in the living room, laughing, unaware, confident, oblivious. I stepped inside, calm, composed, hiding the storm inside. "Can we talk?" I asked, voice steady, controlled. They both turned, smiles fading, sensing the shift. Emily's hand twitched, subtle panic flickering across her face. James hesitated, unsure, guilt already forming in his eyes. I took a deep breath, opened my journal, evidence in hand. "All of this, everything I've seen, everything I know, it's here," I said, voice low, controlled. Emily laughed nervously. "You're overreacting, it's not what you think." I shook my head. "No, I'm not. I have proof, texts, messages, photos, everything, it's all here." James took a step back. I can explain." "Explain? How do you explain betrayal, lies, trust shattered?" I asked sharply. Emily's face paled. I didn't mean, it just happened." I held up my hand, stopping her. "Don't. Just don't. You had choices, and you chose this over me, over us, over family." James swallowed, guilt heavy, eyes avoiding mine. I continued, cutting, precise, every word deliberate. "I trusted you, believed in you, loved you, and you destroyed everything." Emily's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I didn't think." "Sorry?" I asked, voice breaking. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't erase the pain, the humiliation, the betrayal." The room was heavy, silence thick, tension unbearable. I laid out the evidence, every text, every photo, every small detail, undeniable. James looked at Emily, shock and horror on his face, realization dawning. I stepped closer. "Look at what you've done, destroyed trust, shattered love, ruined family, for what? Money? Attention? A fleeting thrill?" Emily could barely speak, stammering. I didn't know, it just happened." I shook my head, tears streaming. "Happened? No, it was choices you made, knowingly, willingly, against me, against us." James tried to reach for her. "Please, we can fix this." I pulled back. "Fix this? You want to fix this after destroying everything? After lying? After betraying me?" Emily collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. "I'm sorry, please forgive me." I stood, silent, watching, heart heavy, rage and grief mingling. Finally, I spoke. "There is no forgiveness, not for this, not for what you've done." The room felt like it was closing in, air thick with tension, emotion, pain. I continued, detailing every betrayal, every subtle manipulation, every act of deceit. James and Emily listened, helpless, exposed, guilty, shamed. I could see the cracks, their perfect facade crumbling, illusion shattered. I added, "And now, everyone knows, everyone will see the truth, the reality, what betrayal looks like." Emily sobbed harder. "No, please don't ruin everything." "I already have," I said softly, quietly, devastatingly. James sank to a chair, head in hands, remorse heavy. I messed up. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't undo this," I replied, my voice shaking, controlled. "You chose, she chose, and now we all pay the price." I stepped back, letting the weight of the moment settle, letting the consequences land. The silence, heavy, suffocating, the room charged electric with emotion. I felt a strange mixed relief, sorrow, triumph, exhaustion. I had exposed the betrayal, confronted them, delivered the first wave of justice. But the journey, the emotional reckoning, was far from over. The storm I had anticipated had begun, crashing, reshaping, leaving scars irreversible. I knew the final acts, the ultimate resolution, were coming. And I was ready, every emotion honed, every plan meticulous, every move calculated. nothing would be the same ever. And for the first time, I felt control, power, clarity. The climax, the reckoning, the exposure had begun. And there was no turning back. The storm had passed, the confrontation, the exposure, the revenge. And yet, the silence that followed was heavier than anything I had imagined. James and Emily, gone, their presence erased, the tension dissipated, but the emptiness remained. I sat in the quiet, heart racing, mind spinning, relief, grief, anger, sorrow, all mingling. The house felt empty, echoes of laughter, memories of love, shattered, replaced by stillness. I thought about everything, every betrayal, every choice, every moment that led here. And I realized revenge had been satisfying in a way. Seeing them exposed, feeling the power shift, witnessing guilt, shock, fear. It gave me a sense of justice, a reclaiming of control, a restoration of dignity. But it came at a cost. The cost of heartbreak, shattered trust, fractured relationships, scars, emotional wounds. I remembered my dreams, the life I had imagined, the love I believed in. And I realized those dreams, that love could never return. I felt a quiet emptiness, a hollowness, a lingering ache. Friends and family wary, careful, the atmosphere changed. Nothing could be the same. I found myself reflecting, thinking deeply, questioning, understanding. Revenge, yes, it had delivered justice, but at what price? I had reclaimed dignity, exposed betrayal, but the emotional toll, the loneliness, the scars. They were mine to bear, permanent reminders, lessons learned. I walked through the house, touched familiar places, felt the weight of memories, both sweet and bitter. I thought about James, the man I loved, who chose betrayal, and Emily, my sister, who chose selfishness. Could I forgive? Perhaps, eventually, but trust that could never return. I realized the revenge, the confrontation, the exposure had freed me in some ways. Freed from illusion, freed from deceit, freed from betrayal. But it also left me cautious, wary, scarred, emotionally raw. I began rebuilding, slowly, piece by piece, careful, intentional, learning to trust again. I focused on myself, my growth, my future, my emotional health. The scars remained, subtle reminders of what had happened, what I had endured. But I also felt strength, resilience, clarity. I knew I had survived. I had acted. I had reclaimed control. And even though emptiness lingered, there was also peace, quiet, a sense of personal power. I reflected on the lessons betrayal teaches: patience, observation, strategy, courage. Revenge, while satisfying, is never without consequence. It leaves marks, deep and lasting emotional echoes that follow. I understood now, balance, boundaries, self-respect were more valuable than any love lost. I found solace in small things, quiet mornings, personal reflection, moments of clarity. And though I would never forget, never fully heal, I could live, move forward, grow. The pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal had shaped me, strengthened me. I was wiser now, more aware, stronger, prepared for life, for challenges, for love, for loss. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I realized, even in devastation, there is strength. Even in emptiness, there is clarity. Even in loss, there is opportunity, growth, rebirth. I closed my journal, evidence still there, proof of betrayal, a reminder. But I felt lighter, freer, empowered. The story, my story, had a dark chapter, yes, but it ended with me standing whole, determined. I knew scars would remain, memories too, pain sometimes. But I also knew I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, my sense of self. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. I breathed deeply, letting the weight lift slowly. The storm had passed, the revenge executed, the consequences faced. And I was left stronger, aware, ready, alive. I would carry the lessons, scars, and memories, but I would also carry resilience, wisdom, clarity, hope. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the revenge, all of it had shaped me, but it would not define me. I had survived. I had acted. I had grown. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace, subtle, quiet, profound. The story of betrayal had ended. The story of survival, resilience, and personal strength had just begun. If you found this story gripping and felt every twist of betrayal and revenge, take a moment to reflect on it with me. Stories like these remind us how trust, love, and choices shape our lives. If this story moved you or sparked memories of your own experiences, consider subscribing for more emotionally intense, real-life stories. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. And share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective because your voice matters.